Story 1. I changed my locks every week, but the photos kept getting closer. This happened to me in 2017. At the time, I was living in a small duplex in East Sacramento, right near the edge of the city's older residential grid. The place was nothing fancy. One bedroom, one bath, an alley behind the house that led to a back gate. It was my first place after moving out of a long-term relationship, and for a while, I felt proud to be alone again. I worked from home as a graphic designer. Quiet days, grocery runs on Mondays. I parked in the same spot every night and always took the trash out barefoot because the bins were just outside the kitchen door. The house had its quirks, pipes that banged in the walls when you flushed, and this weird way the light never fully reached the hallway after 5 p.m., but nothing I hadn't learned to live with. The first thing that changed was the lock. I'd come home one night, put my key in like I always did, and the deadbolt caught halfway. Not jammed, just resistant. It clicked eventually, but something about the angle felt wrong, like the whole cylinder had shifted a few degrees. I told myself I was overthinking. A week later, it happened again. I started switching the locks. At first it was monthly, then every 2 weeks, then weekly. There wasn't a break-in, nothing missing, nothing moved, but I started to feel it. Someone was entering my space, not to take, just to remind me they could. One morning, I woke up and the toothpaste was uncapped. A small thing, easy to explain, but I don't sleep with the bathroom door open, and I always close it. I began sleeping lighter, keeping a light on in the hall. I'd wake to the smallest sounds. The click of the fridge compressor, the stretch of old wood expanding. I started marking the backs of drawers with pencil, checking door frames for dust patterns. There was never anything obvious, just a sense of someone paying attention. I kept to my routine, same coffee shop every Thursday, same jog route every Saturday morning. I thought routine would protect me, or at least keep me sane. Then I started finding photos, just one at first, on the kitchen counter. Printed on matte paper like from a cheap drugstore kiosk, a photo of me walking back from the mailbox. I was holding a Trader Joe's bag. I hadn't noticed anyone. There was no envelope, no note. I didn't call the police. What would I say? It happened again 2 days later. Another photo, this time me inside through the window. The angle suggested the backyard. I installed a camera, one of those Wi-Fi ones you monitor from your phone. I never caught anything. Nothing triggered it. But the photos kept coming, sometimes tucked behind the coffee pot. Once slipped into the spine of a book on my nightstand, always closer. One of them showed me sleeping. I could see the curve of my shoulder under the sheet. It was dark, blurry, probably taken without a flash, but I recognized the pattern of the blanket. The lamp was off, and my back was to the door. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints. I checked every screw on the window locks. Every time I changed the locks, the photos would stop for a few days, then they'd start again. The police came once. They walked through, looked around, and told me unless something was stolen or damaged, there wasn't much they could do. One officer, young, clean-shaven, asked if I might be having memory problems. I didn't answer. I started sleeping with earbuds in, soft rain sounds. I began sedating myself at night, melatonin, then Benadryl. Eventually, heavier stuff from a doctor I barely knew. That's when things got worse, not louder, just more precise. My alarm clock would reset itself to the wrong time, not wildly off, just 10 minutes, just enough to make me late, just enough to make me question if I was slipping. My shoes were once found with the laces tied differently. My favorite mug was on the wrong shelf. One night, I left a string of baby powder across the floor in front of the bathroom. In the morning, the powder was untouched, but the lights were all off. And the next photo, it was of me brushing my teeth. Through the crack in the bathroom door, my reflection wasn't visible. Just me and the hand of someone else, barely in frame, pressing lightly against the edge of the wall. I bought the recorder at a pharmacy 2 towns over, paid in cash. I didn't want it tied to me. It was small, not very high quality, meant for interviews, not surveillance, but it had a voice activation mode. That was what I needed. I placed it on the floor behind the dresser in my bedroom. The first night, it picked up nothing, just my breathing, a cough, the distant sound of a siren passing sometime around 3 a.m. The second night was different, only 12 seconds of audio. It began with soft humming, a low, deliberate melody, one I didn't recognize, not a song, just a series of notes repeated gently. The recorder clicked on, then silence. Then the humming again, closer this time, then finally a whisper, 2 words, almost time. That was all. I played it back over and over. The voice wasn't mine. I checked every lock again, every window, every hidden place. I opened my closet and stared into it like a child checking for monsters. I flipped the mattress. I threw out the couch pillows. I scrubbed the kitchen floor. Nothing. I took the recording to the police. The officer was polite, said the quality was too poor to use, that it could be anything, that maybe I was sleep-talking. He offered me the number for a counseling service. I left before I raised my voice. I began recording every night. Most of the time, nothing. But once, just once, it picked up something else. A series of mechanical clicks, like a camera shutter, followed by 5 minutes of absolute silence, then footsteps, slow, soft, not crossing the room, just shifting weight in place, and then the sound of my bedroom door closing, so faint I could barely hear it. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom after that. I moved into the bathroom, put a mat on the floor, slept with the shower curtain drawn, so I couldn't see the door. It made no sense. But that's what fear does. It breaks logic into smaller pieces. The humming came back. Once I heard it not through the recorder, but through the wall, directly behind the medicine cabinet. I pressed my ear to the tile and heard it. Soft, slow, patient. The police refused to come again. The dispatcher sounded tired, said I should talk to my landlord, that maybe I had mice. Mice don't hum. I stopped recording after that. I already knew. I started reading forums, not the paranormal ones, the behavioral ones, the ones written by former victims, some written by psychologists. A phrase kept coming up, intimacy mapping, a kind of stalking not based on possession or confrontation, but disassembly. They learn you by habit, by quiet. They map your life down to the minute. Know your sleep cycles. Know how many times you open the fridge. Know what part of the floorboard creaks when you check the front door at 11:12 p.m. They don't break in, they slip in. When you're sedated, when you're dreaming, they change things. Slightly, they don't want your stuff. They want your sense of self. Some call them stealth compulsives, people who find satisfaction in eroding others, not through pain, but through distortion. They prefer ambiguity, the fear of not being sure. I started keeping a log, the date, the time, the evidence. October 8th, toothpaste cap unscrewed. October 11th, photo left in sock drawer. October 13th, front door locked from inside when I returned. October 15th, recorded whisper, almost time. October 16th, no entry, but the towel on the bathroom floor was dry, as if replaced. I submitted the logs to a detective. He read them slowly, looked at me with that half-sympathetic look that people reserve for those they think are unraveling. "No crime committed," he said. "You're clearly under stress." That was the final report. No charges filed, no suspect, nothing to protect me from. I stopped reaching out after that. There was nothing left to say. I posted one final message on a support forum. It read, "He's already inside. He's just not here to hurt me. He's here to rewrite me." I haven't posted since. Story 2. He knew details I'd never shared and still claimed we'd never met. This happened to me in 2019. At the time, I was a second-year grad student living in a shared house just north of campus in Portland. The house was old, with floors that sloped slightly toward the kitchen and a patchy lawn no one bothered to mow. I rented the smallest room, just enough space for a twin bed, desk, and bookshelf. My 2 housemates were often away. One worked night shifts, the other spent most weekends with her boyfriend. I liked the quiet. I liked routines. Every morning at 7:45, I walked 4 blocks to the corner cafe, ordered the same drink, a black coffee, no room, and sat by the window to grade papers. On Mondays, I wore the striped sweater. Wednesdays, the navy coat. My emails were answered within the hour. My trash went out Thursday nights. I didn't think anyone noticed. The first time I saw him, he was already sitting at the cafe when I walked in. Middle seat, back wall, hoodie, grey. He didn't look up when I passed, but something about his posture felt deliberate, like he was waiting for someone or something. A week later, he was there again. Same hoodie, same seat. He never approached me, never stared, but I started noticing him more. On the bus, at the library, outside the market where I picked up groceries on Saturdays, always nearby, always casual. I convinced myself he was just a fellow student, someone on a similar schedule. But then things started surfacing. One afternoon, I found a photo in my mailbox. No envelope, no note. It showed my desk, the one in my bedroom, papers stacked on the right, lamp angled toward the wall. The photo was taken from outside, through the window, from a distance that shouldn't have allowed such clarity. Nothing else was disturbed. The window was locked. My things untouched. I tried to forget it, told myself it was a prank, a mistake. I tossed the photo, locked my bedroom window tighter, and pulled the curtain all the way across. But then, the messages started. The first came through a dummy email. The subject line read, "You left your favorite mug on the porch again." No name, no signature. I hadn't told anyone about that mug. It was chipped on the bottom, and only I used it. I sometimes left it out when reading on the porch swing, especially on Sunday mornings. I checked with my housemates. Neither had seen anything strange. I changed all my passwords, deleted my social media, started paying in cash, even stopped using my phone to order coffee, but the emails kept coming. "You switched shampoos, not a fan of the new one. I miss the sound of your steps when you hum. You laugh differently when you think no one's listening." None of them were threatening. Just observant. Too observant. I printed every message, made a binder, brought it to campus security. They told me it could be anyone, a classmate, a neighbor. They said they'd keep an eye out. They didn't. One night, I stayed up late finishing a draft. Around 1:30 a.m., I walked out back to toss something in the recycling bin. The alley was quiet, cold, damp with fog. There near the bin was a folded paper napkin. I unfolded it. Inside were 4 lines, typed, "You threw out the printout but kept the receipt. I would have done the same. You're learning." I didn't understand how he could know that. I had printed out a draft that morning, thrown it away that afternoon. But yes, the receipt was in my jacket pocket, still crumpled, still there. I stopped throwing anything away in public bins after that. I burned paper in a metal dish behind the house. I deleted drafts, saved nothing. But it didn't matter. He wasn't guessing. He was rebuilding me, piece by piece. It was a Wednesday morning. I was cleaning, something I rarely did during the week, but I needed the distraction. My brain felt taut, like stretched thread. I had barely slept. Every time the heater clicked on, I jumped. I moved my desk for the first time in weeks, pulled it from the wall to vacuum behind it. That's when I saw it. A small piece of tape, securing a folded piece of notebook paper under the desk. My heart stopped. I didn't touch it right away. Just stared. Then slowly I peeled it free. It was my handwriting, not just similar, identical. The slope of the letters. The way I looped my lowercase e. I opened it. 4 words. "You knew I was listening, that's why you whispered." I stood there, frozen. The only sound was the low hum of the heater kicking back on. I hadn't whispered anything, not recently, not to anyone. But the phrasing, it scratched at something familiar, like an echo of a half-remembered conversation. I opened my notebooks, flipped through margins. Nothing. I tried to recall the last time I'd written something by hand, maybe a note to myself, maybe I'd forgotten. But the tone wasn't mine. It read like a conversation, a response, as if someone had spoken to me and I had answered, silently. I kept the note, but made no copies. That night, I pulled out every notebook, every post-it, every envelope I'd ever scrawled on. I compared the loops, the spacing, looked for inconsistencies. There weren't any. He hadn't forged it. He'd made me write it, or convinced me I had. Later that week, I found a plastic grocery bag tucked inside my pillowcase. Inside, receipts. Every one of them mine. Dated, folded, and ordered. Some months old, some I hadn't remembered keeping. There was a note at the bottom, typed. Everything has shape, even you. I stopped sleeping in the house after that. Rented a short-term unit across town. Left no forwarding address. Paid in cash. Got a burner phone. The emails stopped, but the notebooks started to fill themselves. I'd wake up to find a line added, a word crossed out. One time, an entire page ripped free and stuffed behind the radiator. It wasn't a haunting. There were no ghosts, no demons. This was control, and I was slowly losing mine. I stopped thinking of him as a stalker. That word didn't fit. It was too direct, too tangible. He was something else. I began researching. There's a pattern, they say. A kind of stalking that doesn't rely on threats or confrontation. Instead, it's built on micro-familiarity, the slow, quiet erosion of identity. They call it invisible intimacy. The person doesn't want to follow you. They want to become you, not literally, but through anticipation, by predicting every move, every thought, until you begin to defer to them without knowing it. They don't have to break in. They just have to predict where you'll be vulnerable. I found cases. A woman whose stalker preheated her oven 5 minutes before she got home, every day for 6 weeks. Another whose Spotify queue would update to match her mood. Another who found her photos rearranged on her phone, not deleted, just reordered, ever so slightly. None of them were believed, because nothing was taken, nothing broken. Police can't prosecute for being known too well, but I was changing. I began forgetting small things, what day it was, who I'd texted, where I'd been. Once I walked past a mirror and didn't recognize my expression, not the face, the look, the way my eyes didn't focus, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. Then came the emails, new address, new account. Still they came. Check your left pocket, you dropped it. I picked it up for you. Inside my coat pocket was a thumb drive. I never opened it. I buried it behind a dumpster behind a Vietnamese bakery I'd never been to before. Then I got on a bus and rode until I didn't recognize the route. 2 days later, another email. Thanks for trusting me. The file was safe, but I know you didn't look. He was right. I began talking to myself out loud, just to hear my voice. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a draft already written, addressed to my mother, short, formal. I hadn't written it, but it sounded like me, structured like me, the rhythm, the cadence. I hit delete, but I hesitated, because part of me wasn't sure I hadn't written it. That night I opened an email and read it. It was 3 lines long, nothing specific, but before I finished, I realized something awful. My lips were already moving. I was mouthing the words before reading them, word for word, like I'd memorized it in a dream, like I'd read it before it existed. He wasn't just inside my space. He was inside the delay between my thoughts, that half second of indecision, where instinct lives. I moved again. No forwarding address, no paper trail. I stopped writing. Stopped buying anything I didn't need, stopped making eye contact. Sometimes I wonder if he's still watching. But the truth is, I don't need proof anymore. Because now, I check the porch every morning. Not to see if he's been there, but to make sure I'm still here. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. Every time I called the cops, they arrived to nothing, but I still had the bruises. This started in the fall of 2022. I was living in a basement apartment in Western Massachusetts. Quiet street, no neighbors close enough to overhear much. The place was cheap, half the price of anything else I could find in the area. The landlord lived upstairs but kept to himself. The entrance to my unit was around back, down a short concrete stairwell that always smelled faintly of rain and rust, even on dry days. At the time, I worked nights at a local news station, remote editing. I spent most of my time alone, hunched over a laptop, headphones on. I rarely left the apartment before sunset. The first time it happened, I was brushing my teeth. I'd just stepped out of the shower and saw something in the mirror that made me stop. A mark on my shoulder, dark, about the size of a thumbprint, right above the collarbone. I didn't remember bumping into anything, didn't feel any pain. But when I touched it, it flared, deep, like something blooming beneath the skin. It felt old, not fresh, like it had been there longer than it had. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe I'd rolled onto something in my sleep. Maybe the towel rack had caught me without me noticing. It faded within 2 days. But then another one appeared. This time, lower, on the ribs. I'd been inside all day, alone. Same shape, same color, same pain, sharp at the edges, dull in the center. I took a photo and zoomed in. It wasn't just a bruise. It looked patterned, not uniform. Like something had touched me, repeatedly, with purpose. After the third bruise appeared, this one on the inside of my forearm, I called urgent care. They told me it could be a blood disorder. I made an appointment, got tests. Everything came back normal. No signs of coagulation issues, the doctor said. She tapped her pen on the clipboard and added, "Sometimes stress manifests physically. The body compensates." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't feeling stressed, but my body disagreed. It was always at night. I'd wake up with a jolt, not from sound, but from sensation, like pressure, as if something had just moved off me. Once, I woke with a shallow breath in my throat and found a bruise already forming along my ribs. I watched it deepen in real time. No fingers, no weight, just the sensation of something receding. I started sleeping with the lights on. All of them. The landlord upstairs didn't notice, or if he did, he never asked. One night around 3 a.m., and I felt something brush my foot under the covers. I threw them off, stood, turned on every light. Nothing. But in the morning, I found a small red mark on my ankle, 3 inches long, like a scratch that had never broken skin. I didn't scratch myself. The pain was there, but not the origin. I called the police the next time it happened. I had woken to what felt like 2 hands pressing against my chest. I couldn't move, not from fear. My limbs just wouldn't respond. When it stopped, I rolled over and dialed 911. The officers arrived 15 minutes later. They looked around, asked the standard questions. Anyone else have access to the apartment? Any recent conflicts? I told them I lived alone, that the door had been locked, that I had bruises I couldn't explain. One of them took notes while the other walked through each room, shining a flashlight across the ceiling corners. "No forced entry," he said. "Maybe you're sleepwalking." I nodded. I didn't say anything else, but the bruises didn't stop. They started appearing in symmetrical places, one on each shoulder, one on each wrist, a faint set of half circles along the tops of both thighs, like restraint, like someone was holding me in place. But I never woke up to it happening, only after. I placed powder around the bed, checked for footprints. Nothing. My body remembered. My mind didn't. It was like something was editing me. Not just hurting me, but deciding when and how I'd be aware of it. I bought a camera. I set it up to record me sleeping. The file was empty the next morning. 4 hours of darkness, no audio, no movement, except one frame, time-stamped 3:47 a.m. A flicker. The entire frame went grey for a single second, and when it cleared, I was in a different position, face down, arms above my head, like someone had moved me. And my back, in that one frame, was already bruised. I decided to stop trying to prove it. Instead, I tried to share it. One night, I called a friend from college, John. We hadn't talked much since graduation, but he was always rational, level-headed. I told him what was happening. He didn't laugh. He didn't try to explain it away. He said, "Okay, let's see it happen." We set up a call. I kept the lights on, placed my phone on a stand across the room, hit record, kept him on video the entire time. We talked about nothing for an hour: music, news, politics. Then something changed. He noticed it first. "Are you cold?" he asked. I wasn't, but I saw myself on his screen, arms pulled in, shoulders hunched, breath slowing. I didn't feel cold, but my body was acting like it was. Then I heard myself whisper, "It's right in front of me." I don't remember saying that, but I did. John's face changed. He leaned toward his screen, confused. He said later that he saw me staring at a spot just off camera, fixed, unblinking. He asked what I was looking at. I didn't answer. Then he saw me tense, not like a flinch, more like compression, like something was pressing on me from all directions. He said my shoulders rose slowly, my arms pulled back slightly, my head tilted, and then I started gasping, shallow, irregular breaths. He called my name. No response. The recording was still going. He screen captured the whole thing. I stayed that way for 34 seconds, frozen, silent. Then I collapsed forward out of frame. When I came to, I was lying next to the bed, shoulder aching, hip sore. I called out to him. He was still on the line, his face white. I said, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know. I had a hand-shaped bruise around my right bicep. It lasted 4 days. The recording? When I watched it back on my own device, the entire moment was missing, just cut, jumped from minute 42 to 44, as if someone had edited it out. On John's recording, it was all there. He sent me the file. I never opened it. I didn't want to see myself like that again, didn't want to see the moment something touched me, that no one else could see, except in the way my body bent around it. I started reading more than I should have. Not conspiracy stuff, not ghost stories, research, documents buried in psychology forums, clinical abstracts, declassified military logs. One phrase kept repeating, "unsensed intrusion." Cases where individuals experienced trauma without a visible assailant, physical symptoms, documented bruises, lacerations, migraines, instances that resisted explanation. In one study from the late 1990s, a woman in Denmark documented a full year of bruising that corresponded with specific dreams. Dreams she didn't remember having until she described them under hypnosis. The marks matched the descriptions. In another case from Arizona, a man developed burns in a pattern consistent with thermal exposure, but no heat source was ever found in his home. Parapsychologists refer to them as non-reactive presences, not ghosts, not hallucinations, but something outside the spectrum of ordinary sensory input, not invisible, just imperceptible. I stopped calling the police. They couldn't log what I was experiencing, couldn't restrain air. One officer did keep checking in, Officer Mendez. She was the only one who didn't seem amused or bored. She came by once a week, asked how I was doing, offered her number if I needed to talk. One night, I left her a voicemail. I didn't say anything, just left the phone recording. In the silence, she heard me breathing, then a thud, then my voice, low and distant. It understands me now. The next morning, she came to check on me. The door was locked from the inside. No answer, no noise. She called backup. They forced entry. Inside, everything was clean, lights on, sink empty, no signs of struggle, except for the note taped to the inside of the front door. It was written on printer paper, 4 words, typed. "He doesn't need help anymore." I understand him now. They never found me. My things were still there, wallet, ID, clothes, even my phone, still open to the recording app. The file was corrupt, but it was named Acceptance. I don't know where I went. I don't remember leaving. But I know I'm not alone anymore. And I don't bruise anymore, at least not where it shows.